So welcome everyone. My name is Darshana Gupte and I'm a Climate Reality Chapter Chair from San Antonio. Today we are going to talk about a very, very important farm bill that is in progress in Congress. And we have a historic opportunity to participate in there and raise our voice and do the right thing. So this farm bill is going to be like $1.5 trillion they are going to spend on this, our country. And it will be even more by 2050. So it says farm bill, but this farm bill is not only for farmers or ranchers. This applies to everyone who eats food, who breathe the air, who drinks water. So it's everybody will be affected. So this is our opportunity to act and participate however we can and raise our voice. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Klaus Meagher from Oregon. And he is a recent climate reality leader. He's into this business for many, many years. He has over 40 years of experience in international food business, designing, developing food system. And he worked for international organization too. So since his retirement, he has focused his attention on food and agriculture in the content of climate change, sustainability, adaptation to a new reality. So let's hear this complex subject that we are about to try to understand from him. And hopefully after end of this training, we will be like we'll understand and why we should be participating in this bill. So with that, Klaus, floor is yours.
Thank you, Darshana. Appreciate it. Yeah, welcome everyone. So I joined Climate Reality Leaders fairly recently. I was at the April training. And as Darshana was saying, my background is in the food service industry. I worked for Disney for 21 years and worked on designing food systems for theme parks, hotels, entertainment centers. So I'm not a farmer, but I have also worked in the wholesale markets internationally for a German company, Metro Cash and Carry, headquartered in Düsseldorf. We operated in 30 countries, and I was working as a head of corporate target group marketing with teams in each country in 30 countries, doing customer research and so on. So I retired in 2013, and I have really since focused on the intersection of climate change with the food system. I joined the Sierra Club, National Food and Ag Grassroots Network team, the Citizen Climate Lobby, Agricultural Action Team, the American Sustainable Business Network, and other groups, to represent a systems perspective on the changes required to mitigate and adapt, to a changing climate. So let me get to my screen here. Okay, and open up the slideshow. So what we wanted today focus the discussion is on the importance of food and agriculture, the way we grow and process and consume food as a starting point. And then we'll start a discussion on the Farm Bill, an overview of the critical issues that we can impact by reallocating funding, not spending more money, but spending it wisely. And the reason for that, when you consider, why does this not want to work? So Yale just published a paper and that says that absent any revolutionary changes in dietary patterns or agricultural production practices, global food production and consumption is projected to contribute an additional 0.7 to 0.9 degrees Celsius of warming. And when you consider we're already at 1.1 degrees Celsius, that is sending us crashing through the looming 1.5 degrees Celsius ceiling. And it has been, my astonishment, that we haven't really focused on food and the food system in the way that we focus on energy, because it really is equally important and equally complex. So the microbial life in soil supports organic life on Earth. The microbial life inside the soil is the foundation of organic life. When you think about the microbial life leading to larger forms of life, out of there come worms and insects which feed higher forms of life, the plants that are coming up from there. It regulates the water cycle, and I'm going to talk about this in some more detail. It stores 2 to 3 times more carbon in the soil than there is in the atmosphere, and it supports plants using photosynthesis to pull carbon and nitrogen out of the atmosphere and into the soil. So it's a necessary component to enable photosynthesis. Soil naturally holds water in relation to the amount of organic carbon it contains. Now, as the soil degrades, water drains from the land, no longer able to hold it. So this is impacting what is called the small water cycle, which I wasn't aware of until fairly recently, the hydrological cycles here. But roughly 60% of local rains really come from this local cycle of soil holding water or local water table, creating transpiration, which then brings the rain back down. So like 60% of local rains in a healthy environment is really due to the small water cycle. So scientists have documented entire regions drying out, because when soil dries out, it disrupts the hydrologic cycle. So besides holding capacity, soil also has a dramatic impact on percolation rates, determining how much rainwater soaks into the ground, affecting flooding and how quickly it runs off, causing erosion. And you can, when you go online, you can see water experiments between healthy soil and dried out soil that has been depleted through all these chemicals. And you can see how the water just runs right through, versus the healthy soil absorbs it like a sponge. So desertification shifts rain patterns, decreasing rainfall on lower elevations and increasing it in higher elevations. This breaks the hydrologic cycle and leads to more severe droughts and storms with flooding and associated damage. And when you consider that, for example, corn, which is one of the most GMO heavy usage of chemicals types of crops, we grow corn on land the size of California, millions of acres of corn, that are over wide areas. So, and here this is sort of the stunning number that came to my attention, a few months back. With each 1% increase in organic carbon, organic matter, the soil can hold an additional 20,000 gallons of water per acre. So considering that healthy soil can have a carbon content of 4+%, maybe up to 10%, these are significant volumes of water. So the recent rains in California, when they had this massive flooding in California, that demonstrated the difference between healthy soil, which holds onto water, and depleted soils where water runs off and takes the soil with it. So this is really a very important part, to understand, how dried out soil is so disrupting the entire climate, the entire weather cycles. So now coming into focus, because almost half the land that can support plant life on Earth has been converted to croplands, pastures, and rangelands, soils have actually lost 50 to 70% of the carbon they once held. So this has contributed about a quarter of all the man-made global greenhouse gas emissions that are warming the planet. So as the soil organic matter dies off because synthetic nitrogen, herbicides, insecticides are killing it, it releases the carbon that's inside the soil, and basically turns it into dirt. So a study from the Earth Institute at Columbia University makes this claim. Now, a 2017 study estimated that with better management, global croplands have the potential to store an additional 1.85 gigatons of carbon each year, as much as the global transportation sector emits annually. And they estimate that this could continue for 20 to 40 years. There is nothing out there in the technology world that would talk about 1.85 gigatons. You know, when you think about solutions for carbon capture, they're talking about millions of tons, maybe, and at incredible cost, right? So here is a natural solution that is readily available to sequester enormous amounts of carbon. And I had a discussion the other day with someone who's saying that this may be overestimated by as much as 40%. Okay, fine. If that's the case, then you still have 1.1 gigatons of carbon per year, right? It's an enormous number that we really need to pay attention to, because there's just no alternative. There's no techno solution that can compete with this here. So those are the basic statistics. And then also I want to add, this is not just about water and the hydrocycle, but it's also about biodiversity, because life originates inside the soil. So when we kill the soil microbiome, we also kill everything around it. The insects you have heard about, in the insects dying off, the species extinction, and so on and so on. That really is all related to the same core root issue. Nutrition. The nutrition in your food is a reflection of the soil it comes out of. And when we have depleted soil, you get nutrient deficient foods. So when you take an apple today, compare that to 50 years ago, and measure the nutrient content and quality in there, it is incredibly depleted, to what we are eating today. So here is a statistical reality. Everyone here has heard about overshoot, and the term you have overshoot.org. And so what does that really mean? Let's break down. What does overshoot really stand for? Basically, we're using more ecosystem services than there is reproductive capacity of the planet. We see 90% of global fish stocks are either fully fished or overfished already. Aquifers are being pumped dry worldwide. I mean, here in the US, it's the Ogallala Aquifer, the California aquifers, Arizona, everyone is pumping aquifers beyond their recovery rate. That same holds true in India, in China, in Indonesia, everywhere you go. These aquifers are a lifeline, short-term lifeline, because they take hundreds and thousands of years to refill themselves. So once an aquifer is pumped dry, that's a serious issue. Where do we go then from there? But so we are today, at 8 billion people, and there is this group, it's called overshootday.org. It's a group of scientists, and they're calculating at what point in the year have we depleted our replenishment rates. And they come up with a factor of 1.8 to explain that we really are using 1.8 times the reproductive capacity of the planet in total. Well, when you take 8 billion people and divide this by 1.8, that means 4.4. That translates to a carrying capacity of the planet based on current consumption patterns of 4.4 billion people. Now, if you take a Western diet into this, then it's maybe 3 billion people. So that's the reality, of how we currently consume resources on the planet. So as we draw down the ecological capital of the planet, we are at the same time increasing our demand on it. With population growth, we're supposed to be at 8.6 billion people by 2030. And then also with a search for higher quality, higher value foods in third world countries, meat and dairy, like China, India, they want to add meat and dairy to their diets, and the impact that will all have. So changing agricultural practice towards regenerative solves a range of problems we're all struggling with here. It builds organic matter into soil, increases the nutritional value of food, increases yield per acre, restores life and habitats, retains water, prevents soil runoff. But importantly, it buys us time to shift out of fossil fuels into clean energy, agroforestry, and energy efficiency. We can change, we have the capacity to change our food system much faster than we change the energy sector. Because you throw in a different seed, you grow a different crop, and you are achieving results instantly. The other focus here, and my partner Joel Stone is working on biofuels, and a focus on low intensity feedstocks. But considering 40% of today's corn and 11% of today's soy crop is used for biofuels. Now, consider that in a global context where you have the Ukraine, for example, one of the most important providers for wheat and corn and sunflower oil and so on, basically knocked off the game. Al Gore showed in great detail how much disruption there already is on a global level in storm, flood, drought-related events all over the world, Asia, Africa, Europe, and here in the US. So can we really afford to have 40% of a corn crop that really competes with the food supply being used for biofuels? So that's one question. The other question, of course, is these corn crops, 33% of corn is using irrigation water from the Ogallala Aquifer, from the Columbia River, from the Mississippi River and Colorado River. So that also needs to adapt and change. We can use perennial grasses, oil seeds, cover crops, which are a big part of regenerative agriculture, can be used, as a biofuel feedstock. So in summarizing this here, the transition into regenerative agriculture will deeply impact the trillion-dollar global industry, just as big as what we did in the end, what we are doing into the energy sector. Now, when you think about how many people have spent a lifetime working with combustion engines, and now comes the electric motor, right? So the entire disruption, infrastructure, and everything. The same thing happens here in the food industry. So business models today in the food and biofuel industries will have to adjust to a new reality and bringing with it, all the complexities and issues that go with that. So let's shift over to the Farm Bill. And again, I just wanted to give you a high-level overview and introduction. The Farm Bill is second only to the Defense Bill in terms of size and complexity. So this is a very high-level introduction here. Here's a book that I would really recommend you get into if you would like to know more and have a deeper interest. So we started creating book clubs in the Sierra Club about 2 years ago when we were, we need to focus on the Farm Bill, and we looked at the Farm Bill. My God, it's a monstrosity. Where do you start, right? And so this book was really very helpful in Daniel Imhoff. He actually spent decades, trying to understand this and structure the information in ways that could be conveyed to a layperson to easily understand. So I would really point you towards this book if you want to know more. It's easy to read, and it's actually gets you right into the topic. Another resource here, and we are passing on this PowerPoint here, and the links are in there guiding you to this material. But the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, NSTAC, which is also partnered with the Sierra Club, is Kiss the Ground, in this broad coalition of NGOs working on Farm Bill issues. They have developed a 2023 Farm Bill platform that I would really recommend you to download and take a look at if you want to really know more in detail about these many aspects where the Farm Bill deeply impacts our economy and what it incentivizes in the agricultural system, types of crops, and so on and so on. So it's a great body of work that we now can appreciate here. So let's take a look at the Farm Bill itself here. And you see that nutrition accounts for 79% of the Farm Bill. So it's a roughly $1 trillion bill, which brings it pretty close into the neighborhood of the defense bill. But we spent 756 billion of that on nutritional assistance programs. Now, I worked in international, and I worked in China and India and Russia and any number of countries, and the American food system just at the base, is just very deprived of access for small farmers, for urban farmers and so on, to get into the market to sell their products. Is very constrained. And so you have food deserts where people completely depend on their SNAP money or their WIC money or whatever nutritional assistance comes in. Children, child nutrition programs in the US are amazingly important, because we literally have a couple million children who are food insecure and depend on this nutritional assistance. So besides looking at this distribution here, there also seems to be more opportunity to create community-based food systems that are more inclusive and better structured. But anyway, so here is the broad-based distribution. Another one here to look, and then so the US dietary guidelines emphasize a plant-forward menu. We know that in order for people to be healthy and have solid nutrition, meat should be an ingredient instead of center plate. Right, so it's about fruits, vegetables, proteins, and grains. Where protein is an ingredient and vegetables should be more of it. And then there's dairy hanging up here. But when you look at how the money is actually spent, 30% is on livestock and animal feed, which is very destructive. When we have these concentrated animal feeding operations, they have an enormously negative impact on soil and water. The animals themselves, who are fed who are fed antibiotics and growth hormones and so on and so on. 12% for biofuels here. But then when you look at fruits and vegetables, 4%. And nuts and seeds, which are also really important protein nutritional components here. 2%. So the allocation is completely misaligned to what people should really be eating. And then we are supporting 21% of the bill goes to exports. Well, exports, it's exporting water. So we have to really be careful what we're exporting, so we don't damage our own internal systems here. So there are a number of NGOs who are working together in partnership to understand where the bill should be pushing towards. And so one of the most important, from my perspective right now, is pathways to market. So I'm going to talk about this in some more detail. Another one is shifting the general policy direction. So prioritize, right now, something like 10% of the farmers get like 80% of the support. It goes to almost all the really large farmers, corporate farmers. And there is a struggle for small and medium-sized farmers to make a living, and we're losing these farms in astonishing rates. So shifting policy to prioritize communities over centralized corporate structures. Now, it's integral for the survival of both our ecosystems and communities, because agriculture is very local. The farmers in in Kansas or in Florida or in California or in Oregon all experience different environments, different types of soil, different climates, access to water, the socioeconomic realities. So you have to have a very local focus in order to restore local soil and watersheds. And then social outcomes, to have over 40 million people depend on food assistance is astonishing. And then over 20 million people live in food deserts, where it hasn't been profitable for companies to set up grocery stores and supply chains because there's no purchasing power there. So how does one address that? And then financing the transition, lots of energy in there. Ecosystem services markets is basically the idea of pay farmers. We need to restore the environment. We need to restore biodiversity. We need to restore the soil, sequester carbon, pay them to do it. We can't bully farmers into bankrupting themselves in changing practices that cost money in terms of buying equipment, having temporary loss of yield and so on and so on. So farmers need financial support, and that's a big topic that's occupying a lot of discussion space at this point. So here is pathway to market, which I'm really passionate about at this point, because to shift into regenerative practices, for a farmer to start restoring soil that's depleted back to health, that means they need to change the types of crops they're growing, because crops there are seeds and crops that are conducive for like a Pacific Northwest climate versus a tropical climate versus a dry land climate now. And so farmers really, as a first step, need to take a look at what am I going to grow here, that really restores my soil. The inclusion of cover crops is critical, because one core principle of regeneration is that there should always be a live root in the ground. The ground should never be bare. Once you till the soil open, it just steams out the carbon. So soil should always be covered. Well, when you put on a crop, that costs money to seed the crop and to put it in and so on. So what type of crop can be turned into a cash crop? So then you need to rotate crops, because each crop uses different nutrients in the soil, and so some take nutrients out, some others put nutrients in. So you need to rotate crops. All of that disrupts the supply chain, because the way the supply chain has organized itself, they're working with farmers that have 10, 20,000 acres of land. They want to have a monocrop because that feeds the industrial supply chain that wants homogenization of inputs. So the current marketplace is not really suited to facilitate the scale of practical transformation that we need to get regenerative products into markets. So you can't ask a farmer to change their crops if they then can't find a market for it. Another thing also is when farmers grow crops in a regenerative manner, it improves the quality of that crop. It improves the nutritional content, and so is that, but it also costs more money. So there needs to be a price premium for farmers who are growing the higher value crops. So that's disruptive to current supply chains, and it requires changes in menus, recipes, aggregation practices, right? The first thing would be we have to decentralize aggregation, because now we're dealing with more smaller farmers with differentiated products. So that is when you think about farmers markets and consumer supported agriculture and so on, that's like 5%, less than 5% of total sales. So that's not going to move the needle. So we have to get into a broader market and find broader acceptance, also with food processors, with processed products in particular. So USDA, and now we're coming to one aspect of the Farm Bill, USDA has announced a framework for shoring up the food supply chain and transforming the food system to be fairer, more competitive, more resilient. So there are programs here like farm to school, farm to hospital, retail market development, that are specifically funded by USDA with grants, with science support, with research, and structure, regulatory support. So these programs open up a demand side, because when you go into institutional catering, those are very large numbers. You have school systems that have 10, 20, 30,000 students serving breakfast and lunch. You have hospitals, large hospital systems, institutions, prisons and so on. All of these are opportunities to supply food from regenerative farmers by creating marketplaces. So that sounds all great until you dig into the details here and find out that to supply an institutional caterer is a complex issue, because first of all, you need to determine the volumes. You may need more than one farmer. You will need a group of farmers that come together to grow this supply, meaning you need an aggregator, you need a processor, because the catering kitchen may want to have their produce pre-washed and cut and sliced and diced. So you need a processor and you need a logistics system. So it gets pretty complicated. And that is a major effort now to scale this entire process here. So this is an example of how the IRA money, the Inflation Reduction Act, puts $20 billion into the conservation programs, and within that framework, there is access to markets as well. So it's really important, because all of these programs are totally oversubscribed. There wasn't never enough money in them. And bottom line really also is we don't need to have new rules and regulations in the Farm Bill. Anything you may want to do, there is already a program in place that may be dormant, or it may be completely underfunded, but they are there. And all it takes is to fund these programs and resource them, which is the other thing, to bring in enough qualified people who know how to operationalize these issues here. So that brings us here. Farmers need science, tools, information to shift into regenerative practices. That's this whole support network, financial support to compensate for investments. And that is upfront, where we have grant money, and it may be in the transition from carbon markets, for example, because farmers, in my mind, agriculture is a perfect destination for carbon markets. There's a lot of questions. All it really requires is an intelligent structure, a contractual frame, that locks in what farmers are doing over time, so you have permanence issues resolved, and then the additionality from continuing practices, that continue to enrich the carbon content of the soil, and then access to markets. If you're asking me to change my crop or put on a cover crop, what do I do with it? It costs me money to put a cover crop onto the field, right? Maybe I have to irrigate it. I may have to plant it, harvest it. What am I going to do with it? So there need to be markets in place, and all of that requires an educated public. Tell others about the benefits of regenerative farming, your health, your personal health. The nutritional quality of the food you eat really depends on what soil it comes out of. Support regenerative farmers, ask for local products, and this is the thing is going to be hyper-local. We have to really go community by community, because each community has a completely different social infrastructure, access to farmers and farmland. There are some great examples of urban agriculture in Detroit, in a number of cities. and then engage your caterer, your grocery store, and ask for support for regenerative farmers, local sourcing and processors. So that was the discussion that I wanted to stimulate. So we're also a nonprofit group. We formed. We actually, my partner and I, started with Citizen Climate Lobby. In their, they had an initiative called Business Climate Leaders. So we were working from within that frame. And so now we advanced, moved on because that initiative ceased, and we moved over to create this climate systems approach. So that was my PowerPoint here, which we are happy to share. And so now we can move on to questions.
Thank you, Klaus, for wonderful presentation and making us aware of all aspects of this farm bill, from basic points, basic food system to what exactly is happening at Washington. So yeah, that's a great presentation. We learn a lot, and I think we have a couple of questions. Laura, you want to go over and?
Yes, I'm going to start from the last ones that were asked, and thank you for that presentation, Klaus, with lots of great information. And a couple of numbers that stood out to me were the 2 million children who are food insecure in the country. Meanwhile, only 6% of the Farm Bill is covering fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. And if we are charged with offering our kids in school a nutritional menu, that there's just such a big disconnect there. So anyway, thank you for that information. Okay, first question I'm going to go with is what do we do from a consumer standpoint? What do we do about purchasing regenerative agricultural products? The meats seem to be a little easier to find. I'm thinking of farmers markets where you can, that the livestock is handled organically, but what about other products that we find at our grocer? How do we support regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, the problem is labeling. And so because there is regenerative is not also organic, right? It's in some crops never really reach organic status because you will always have to have some degree of using herbicides and pesticides to protect the crop and so on. But so there is a label emerging, right? Regeneratively produced. But I think more immediately, the best support you can give is to go into your community, and if you have children in school, go and ask the local caterer what they can do to bring in some fresh vegetables from the local markets onto the menu. Ask in your company, if there's a caterer there, can we have some fresh local products? And for restaurants to partner with local farmers and appreciate those that do. Like in my hometown, I live in Bend. There are several restaurants who are very proudly partnered with local farmers. Microbreweries who have their local hops and grains grown here and create a wonderful flavor of beer that's very local. So it's really the awareness that that you want to have to support local farmers. Another thing is, there is a regulatory process that really, when you talk about meat, for example, there are 4 companies that control some 90% of the US meat markets. They're multinational corporations. One is Brazilian, one is Chinese, so their motivations are very different, and it makes it very difficult for small farmers to raise animals and then monetize that, right? So because the farmers market is really not not a great destination for any kind of volume. These are small amounts. I mean, if you have like, you slaughter like one animal and, that's about all you can sell, if that, but we're talking about huge volumes that are really required. And so there is an opportunity for small farmers, for example, to grow pigs and poultry, rabbits, with byproducts, because when you're thinking about food waste, a lot of waste actually happens on the farm already, because there's produce that's not quite too big, too small, blemished, and so on. But all this is great feedstock for these animals. So traditionally, farms have always been multi-crop with integrated livestock. And you basically get free protein because what these animals eat, you have already, or you can grow easily on the farm. But then there is in the community oftentimes no slaughterhouse capacity. There is no no USDA approved, a facility where you can process your animal and then sell it to restaurants and retail stores, right? So that entire regulatory process really needs attention. And so we here in Oregon and from within the Sierra Club and other groups, we're really focusing on tracking what is being done in the state legislature, and in the county that impacts local farmers. So it's just this awareness that you need to help farmers to get their product into the market, and meat is highly profitable. If we can open up the meat markets to small farmers and provide and let them monetize this, would be the best way to assist small farmers to become profitable.
Thank you. Perry Kaler, I see your hand up, and since that was your question, I hope I interpreted it well, but why don't you unmute and go ahead with another question?
You did, Laura. Thank you so much. Klaus, that was an excellent presentation, and I appreciate all you've said right now. I mean, gosh, there's so much to cover here. I live in an area, similar to yours, where I have great access. I'm in Menlo Park, California. That's near San Francisco, south of San Francisco. We have a tremendous number of small farmers on the California coast, very near us. I have access. If I were a vegetarian, I would be struggling. I'm not, and so I've supported regenerative agriculture by purchasing regenerative meat and dairy when possible. So we do pay a price to do that. It's an investment in the world's future, I believe. I like to think of it that way. As small as I am, as one consumer, I tell people about it. But the difficulty is I order my meat from Keller Crafted. You can get a meat box every 8 weeks. It's all California, Oregon, and I think maybe one other state, so the transit is not that far. There are things we can do with the Farm Bill to improve local regional access, and specifically meat production, meat slaughtering abattoirs that are on farm or near farms that serve smaller communities. But the produce piece of it is really difficult to unpack. I go to a local farmer's, or it's a farm stand. They have things from, brought in from Fresno or Gilroy or Half Moon Bay, the areas near us that have agricultural production. But it is difficult to know whether it is regeneratively grown. And the owner sometimes will spotlight it on a dairy product they carry. I've never seen it on a piece of produce ever. I order from Terra Farm, which is a 100% of proceeds to the farmer nonprofit, a woman in Silicon Valley founded to give back. And I order from them. People volunteer to accept boxes on their doorstep that consumers can then go and pick up. It's very well priced. It beats anything. It's all organic, certified. But I asked if it was regenerative, and the answer I got was the farmers are small and they're women farmers and they're doing the best they can. So How do we elevate market-wise our understanding as consumers? How do we get to that produce? I mean, if we're in Oklahoma, where wheat is a big crop or soy is a big crop, how are we going to find produce? That was really the heart of my question. But I do think the Farm Bill point that we need to get local regional markets into our, for regenerative agriculture. I think that's really important, both for food supply chain issues and for promoting healthier practices in farming. And I'm sorry I took so long there.
Yeah, no,
Thank you,
that's okay. The core best way to say it is know your farmer. Know the people you're buying from, and really that's what it boils down to. Because unfortunately, I mean, even the organic label, anytime you come up with a label, it gets compromised in no time, right? So when you go to the store and you buy organic, most of that really comes from hydroponics. Right? It's not grown on soil. This comes from hydroponics, which is not really regenerating anything because there's no soil involved. So it's organic in theory, but it certainly is not regenerative. So that's why the regenerative movement talks about regenerative organic, combining those two. That means that this organic product comes out of soil. So yeah, I mean, it's truly worth paying attention to local farmers and helping them to make a living. Now, it has to be profitable, and that's, we can't ask farmers or anyone really to spend more money and extend more and more effort and so on for no financial reward. And they actually put their business at risk for doing it, right? So there has to be money involved here, and hopefully, if this can be scaled adequately, then the price drops. Now, so if a farmer, and I see when I was watching here in Bend, when I started to look in how is the local system organized and so on. There really is a lack of information going back and forth in the marketplace. So farmers can know if I grow 5,000 pounds of potatoes, I know I can sell them because there's a processor who makes ketchup here in the market, and there are restaurants who will use this for salsa and so on. You need to have market security before you start growing stuff. And so it's going to be a process, but the more people are aware, and understand the process here, the easier it will become.
Thank you, Klaus. I see we have another question from Linda. Go ahead, Linda.
Not a question, a perspective from somebody who's farmed for 13 years in this country.
Right?
Go ahead.
As one of the small women-owned businesses that did everything I could to stay afloat with no help from the federal government to speak of. So there's a number of things that need to be added to this discussion. One is there's no lack of demand for small farmers' products. All of us can sell out. That's not the issue. The issue is, how do you get more farms to be growing the food that we all believe is the healthy food we should be eating? So the chart that Klaus put up for the Farm Bill pie chart is actually out of date. The current Farm Bill has 7% of the bill's money going to commodity crop payments. So wheat, soy, corn, sorghum, et cetera, et cetera. And we continue to have that problem in this country simply due to who's lobbying the Congress. So we can sit here and talk all day about go support your local farmer, but that's not going to change the Farm Bill. What the organic, regenerative, small local food system farms need to be doing is building lobbying clout. And so yesterday I spoke with the Organic Farming Association, but NCAS is another great group that's trying to work on these things, but they're still small. And we need the healthy side of the food system to have more lobbying power in Congress. I suggested to the woman who's the director of the Organic Farming Association, when I spoke with her about this very subject, why aren't we pushing for some of that 7% of the commodity crop money to go to local food production? And they're intimidated. They don't have the bandwidth. They have 3 full-time staff for a nationwide organization, 3. So if we are serious about shifting where the money is spent in this country, we need to start building significant more effort in lobbying power with Congress. The other thing I wanted to throw in is I grew 32 acres of organic hazelnuts and an acre of vegetables, berries, and fruit trees. The only subsidies that I got were from NRCS for about 4 acres of the 33 acres to do cover crops. That's all they would give me. They invested $12,000 over 3 years. So roughly $4K. And I approached them for money for irrigation, and they didn't take me serious because I was a woman farmer doing organic in what they see as a commodity crop. Nuts are considered commodities, even though they're not in that other category of commodity. And they didn't think I was for real. The guy that came and visited the farm just didn't believe that I was, they thought I was a hobby farm. So money needs to be applied not just to cover crops, but to compost production. And one of the things that I think we ought to be lobbying for is in every state, all 50 states, there needs to be the USDA-backed, organized compost recycling of food waste into a compost system that then is returned back to farms. But that's not what we're doing. So my farm had to go buy retail compost, buy the 18-wheeler load to try and get it out onto my farm. And I only could ever afford what I could afford. There was nobody helping me pay that cost. Finally, there's another point I wanted to make. Yeah, we really, I don't know if this is a farm bill discussion or this is a motivating everybody to go support your local farmer. The farm bill is skewed heavily towards those who are the squeaky wheel. And the local food system has nobody speaking for it other than through these personal Zoom calls. So, I mean, I would encourage that it's not going to happen for this farm bill. But one of the things, or two goals in my mind, is the 50-state composting system needs to happen and be a priority. And the subsidies that go to commodity crops need to be challenged and get the healthy food, veggies, fruits, nuts, to be given some of that crop subsidy money. So the other problem I had at my booth was I'd get the question, why is my food so expensive? And the answer, one of the answers is it's not subsidized. This is what I have to charge in order to make it, to survive.
Right.
So these are the challenges that the US has had in a very messed up, capitalistic, supporting large scale ag, and small scale farmers are completely on their own. And I would think that that's what we want to try to work on and challenge. So
Linda, let me take you up on a few of your points. First of all, the whole point of this conversation is to make squeaky wheels louder, right? I mean, that's why we're talking. And then I would argue that the 2023 Farm Bill is not done yet. You know, we are in the middle of pulling together a lot of resources to influence the legislative process. That means we need to talk to our representatives and senators and make sure they understand our concerns, because the Farm Bill is a 5-year bill. The last time we messed up the Farm Bill because we are not organized at all to deal with it in 2018. We just wasted 5 years. Now it's 2023. We can't afford to have another 5 years go by with completely misallocated funding. So, but let me take the screen for a moment, because I wanted to show you one significant initiative here that has been pulled together by the Kiss the Ground organization in partnership with the American Sustainable Business Network. And that is to focus us now onto the Farm Bill.
On May 17th, we launched an audacious campaign.
If you believe in a healthy, abundant future
For yourself,
your family, and your community, join us in calling for strong support
for regenerative
agriculture in the farm.
together, we have worked to advance the shared goals of regenerating soil, economies, communities, and health through federal policy reform, and are now over 100 organizations strong with 10,000 public supporters. We received early support from Secretary Vilsack and Chairman Scott and made an impression on the Hill in June when Will Harris, Ron Kreitz, and Yadi Wong headed to DC to meet with Congress. The stories of these farmers ensured our policy platform resonated with both sides of the aisle. Soil is our common ground was ringing true. Farm tours continued through the year, bringing members and staff to the field to experience regeneration. Working with farmer friends and local partners, we brought Representatives Panetta and Carver Hall out to California ranches. We also brought staff from Senator Braun, Congressman Blumenauer, and Congressman Thompson's offices out to events and tours. Summer and fall kept us all busy with hearings in the field and on the Hill. Paraboy testified to the Oversight Committee.
Regenerative agriculture is a critical solution to the farm crisis.
Chairman Scott held a historic hearing on soil health and regenerative agriculture.
Soil health. This is what is so important today.
And Rick Clark told the committee how his farm saved millions of dollars in input costs by regenerating the soil, and continued to call for greater representation of BIPOC and Indigenous producers in the conversation.
This is urgent, and it's critical that we have bipartisan action on the topic at hand today. American farmers are the most productive in the world, but we have to acknowledge the condition our soils are in.
Across the country, farmers and coalition members showed up to every field hearing, sharing firsthand stories of why regenerative farmers and ranchers should be supported for the farm, for your food, for our future.
My name's Jim Kleinschmidt. I grew up on a family farm in Nebraska. We know regenerative farming can help reduce costs, increase fertility and water holding capacity, and reduce risk for farmers. We fully support Regenerative America's platform and all efforts to increase education, technical assistance, and incentives for farmers, ranchers, and landholders.
Throughout it all, we've been spreading a message. The next Farm Bill is a historic opportunity. From creative partnerships with members of the business network, to conferences, to the stages of Expo and Farm Aid.
I'll just add, so Regenerate America is a bipartisan coalition. That's really important, because you can't really get a lot done in Congress without that. They need to be getting behind regenerative agriculture, being aware of the importance of soil health and how that impacts climate, how it impacts droughts, flooding, biodiversity loss, farmer livelihood loss. So we can't do this without working together.
So thank you to the farmers and ranchers who are leading this work, to the coalition partners who have joined the call for action, and to everyone who has put their boots on the ground to build our soils and build a better, more regenerative future for all of us. In just 7 months, we have made immense progress advancing policies that will support soil health and are ready to bring the conversation to the new Congress come January. We are looking ahead to the next year with excitement and hope. It can't be done alone, but together we can regenerate America.
Okay.
So just to show you that there is really significant energy already in this regeneration effort here. And the really cool stuff is that you have organizations like the Sierra Club, like NSAC, Rural Coalition, National Farmers Union, really all starting to work together, because when you bring down all your energy to, we need to regenerate the soil, then every effort that is engaging will come back to that, right? Soil and watersheds. Water, for example, is a super important part to communicate with the general public. 50% of US watersheds are too polluted for fishing or recreation because of the agricultural runoffs. You know, nitrogen, for example, you have algae blooms all along the coastlines, Gulf of Mexico, Florida, you know, with fish, dead fish are coming onto the shorelines. So the pollution caused by herbicides, insecticides is just amazing. And so that also, so water, the availability of water is an easy way to communicate the need to restore soil.
Thanks, Klaus. And the presentation was a good one as well. Can I ask you to put this presentation, today's presentation, in the chat, a link to that? Do you have that available?
The Regenerate America, you mean?
No, your presentation for
Oh,
today.
yeah.
Okay.
We are recording and I'll give you the.
Okay. And I'm going to go one more. Peter, Bella, I know you've had your hand up for a while. Are you ready to ask your question?
Yes. It seems to me that the necessary fragmentation of farmland away from the large acreage monoculture harvests to include crop rotation and manage carbon content of the soil and include cover crops and other regenerative farming practices does, as you say, imply a hyperlocal farming soil to table framework. It also seems as though the Farm Bill must necessarily take a top-down agricultural wide systemic approach in management and funding. Can you outline how the NGOs are attempting to form the Farm Bill with these multiple scales in mind? Thank you. Great presentation.
Yeah. I'm just bringing up something else. I mean, I wasn't. Okay, so let me explain. During the Dust Bowl crisis in the 1930s, under Roosevelt, they developed the National Soil and Water Conservation Districts. And the idea was that you needed to bring science and resources directly from a central place down to the farm. And you didn't want to lose all of this in the middle, where funding is getting sidelined. So even today, there are over 3,000 soil and water conservation districts throughout the United States. And their mission is, and that has gotten lost a little bit, and that needs to be revitalized, their mission is to bring knowledge to the local market about what USDA has available in terms of resources. What are the grants that are applicable? You know, what is the science report that is applicable? That is their role. Now, here in Bend, Oregon, when I looked at the last election, there are 4 positions available for soil and water conservation districts. 2 are open, no one was even running for it. So that means people don't even know what that is and how it works. So on the one hand, you have USDA leaning in with some great products and ideas. And let me just take the screen for a moment, because I think this is really important. I wasn't prepared for the other one, but see, when you go online, you can get, what are the USDA conservation programs? There's the reserve enhancement and emergency, forest restoration, wetland program, grassland program. You have here environmental quality incentive program, conservation innovation grants, any number of products. Here is the $90 million in grants to strengthen local and regional markets for US agricultural products. So when you go online, just scan through US Department of Agriculture and see what's on there. You'd be amazed what's on there. The amazing thing, of course, is that it never got funded because you had over the last 20, 30 years, lots of fights in Congress about this program needs to be created. So they succeeded in creating it, but then it goes there and doesn't get funded.
But farmers shouldn't have to be applying for grants. The USDA ought to be walking onto my farm and asking, how can we help?
Well, that's really what.
And that's not what happens. So yes, there are grant programs out there, but none of that goes to crop production per se. There isn't money to invest in healthy crops. There is in all these sort of supporting structures of soil enhancement and equip and things like that, but they're little chunks, they're little small pots of money. They are not tackling the big problem of what food production are we funding in this country.
Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. May I say that in working with the Inflation Reduction Act, what is coming out of that, of course, it's a very different structure, but the bottom line is that we are looking at the idea, I appreciate your point, Linda, that you shouldn't have to be a grant writer. What the Inflation Reduction Act is creating through EPA are policies that put in place grant networks. And what we're trying to create here in San Antonio are what we call navigators. That is, we're trying to figure out how to structure the education of individuals, because there are plenty of people who are interested in taking this kind of work on, even pro bono. Understand the program offerings well enough so that for my purposes in environmental justice or climate reductions, climate mitigation, given the IRA funding, ideally I would be educated enough, well enough that somebody walks up to me and says, I want to start a solar community farm, XYZ, details. Who's got the funding? Where do I apply? How does it work? Now, the EPA is setting up a system that is supposed to be turnkey, that is supposed to be such that you walk in the door, you make your request, they will hold your hand. If you need to start a 501c3, they will help you. If you need to write a grant application out for your farm or your issue, they will help you. So I would hope that that is something that can be, I see that as the soil conservation district work that you're talking about, Klaus. In other words, they are supposed to be the porters, the carriers of that information into the community. So I don't know if the Farm Bill has strengthening those soil conservation districts for that outreach effort in mind, but it seems like a good place to start. Thank you again. Great presentation, great conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I actually worked, I did a webinar for the Sierra Club in Illinois, and we had the director of the Illinois Soil and Water Conservation District participating, and it was a wonderful conversation, and that alerted me to this is an organization that was put in place to solve what was a national crisis, the Dust Bowl. Where millions of acres of farmland had been so degraded now that the soil was blowing off. And to initiate a response to that happened at that time. But, and they're still there. There's 3,000 offices throughout the United States, but they need to be resourced, and they need to have they need to rebuild the infrastructure that was in place during the Dust Bowl crisis, so we can have basically a national alert. Go and here's here are the resources. Here's what you need to know, kind of thing.
What, did you say, Klaus, that was under the USDA's purview?
Yes, well, no, this is actually an independent organization. I wish I could find that. I can't find the website right now. The National Soil and Water Conservation District. This brings me to the National Resource Conservation Service here. It's actually independent of USDA, you know, in some areas very active, and in some other areas, you know, so they sort of, you know, have lost their purpose here.
Yeah, and I would sympathize with Linda, with her difficulties, but I think USD or government don't have that many resources to go state to state and farmers to farmers and ask for their difficulties or ask for, you know, their issues. So I think it's a catch-22 type of thing that we need help, but it's difficult to get help. So, and they do have resources that can be used, but not that many. So it's just
Is
Well,
this-
I think
losing
it's
situation.
also, the USDA needs to recognize who else is farming in this country. It isn't just the large acreage people, the agribusiness people, which is still who they see as the farmers in this country. They don't recognize the small local farmers. You're just a little hobby endeavor from their point of view.
Yeah, they're helping big farmers like big grocery store chains and all that. They're providing those food. So obviously, yes, they are going to
But I just put a link into their website, National Association of Conservation Districts.
So Linda, how can we as a group, I mean, this is recording, so we can just post it on Reality Hub, but how can we as a group help you as a small farmer here to support your work, you know?
Well, I mean, it's a very convoluted problem and you can't solve it all in one farm bill, but I suggested two things.
Yeah, compost.
A 50-state focus on cycling food waste back into compost and back into farms. That's just a no-brainer. But not every state is doing that. And generally it's private companies, as in Oregon, that produces compost, and then they're going to charge you the going rate. They're making way more profit on their compost than the farmers are on their food production. So composting that's subsidized by the USDA. And
So
second,
composting, people cannot, I mean, if people can start composting in their backyard, that's one that can help too, or no? Or farmers can do on their own.
we need large scale composting, large scale, in multiple sites in every state, so that farmers ought to get, you know, a wholesale price as a minimum, if not a subsidy out of the USDA on top of that, to be able to seriously restore carbon into the soil requires money. And we're not subsidizing that currently. But the other thing that I mentioned earlier is the commodity crop subsidy. 7% of that pie chart is going to the wrong crops. It's going to the crops that are making people sick. So corn and corn oil, soy, etc. I mean, you can rattle them all off. Wheat, obviously we need a certain amount of wheat, but wheat can be a good rotation crop, but I mean, we need a farm system and farm subsidies that shift towards the crops that we all should be eating.
So I see on the chat, Jackie Apple wrote that if you can write some of this up and share on Climate Reality website, then people can share information and, you know, somehow help. That will be great, great source, you know, because right now they are, or also can this app that we all, most of us are familiar with. If you can contact them, they will also write this issue, you know. So that will be another.
If I must just say, Peter Bella posted the link to the National Association of Conservation Districts. And there is a 10-minute video there that's really worthwhile watching, because it gives you the history of what that is, of who they are. And then you can find your local conservation district. You know, just engage. I mean, it's like I engaged locally here and asked, so how come, you know, you have 2 positions vacant? No, is it, why is there no one applying for it? It's like paid positions on top of it. So anyway, I think we have a question from Perry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, Linda, I don't know what state you're in. In California here, we have a mandatory composting program. Restaurants have to compost. We have curbside composting so that all our food scraps and some papers, which I'm a little concerned about, can go into our compost bins. But I don't know what the end point of that compost is, if it's reaching farmers, if that distribution is occurring. So I'd be really curious to learn more, but I just thought I would share that we do have a state program here.
You have to appreciate California is light years ahead of every other state in the country. Okay. So not to mention it has such a large agriculture investment in the state. Oregon, there's curbside pickup. Some of it collects food waste, some does not. It's completely random. And none of it is going back into a system that is trying to recycle it straight back to farms. It's going into commercial compost, and, you know, homeowners and residential people can go purchase their bulk load of compost, but that isn't returning it to the farm, which is the higher priority place to put the compost.
Thank you for your comment.
Also, Jackie, I was going to mention, if you have a copy, or you can link to a flyer or post a flyer that you're using. I know it's very grassroots, but you know, we all have access to farmers markets and to some of the local farmers to you know, hopefully push them into this kind of regenerative thinking. That might help.
Yes. Can you hear me? Wait a second. I'm okay.
Yes.
You can hear me?
you.
Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. Yeah, I think that we made some flyers up when we held our movie showing of Kiss the Ground. And that was just, we didn't have a chance to really tell people a lot about it or whatever, but we did provide links to that regenerative agriculture website that's associated with the movie. And we also found some great information just explaining the whole regenerative agricultural and soil restoration process on the World Economic Forum website. I have these things somewhere, but I mean, we can post some PDFs to the Climate Reality site.
That would be great. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe we could all put our heads together and figure out how we could help get the most important information summarized in a little sheet that we could send to our representatives, like have you know, something like that, where we all, like Linda's ideas, where we could share that with representatives and explain why, you know, starting with composting and then moving into support for the correct kinds of crops and everything is the most important way to help facilitate the changes. You know, but addressing your local government is the way to also do that. You know,
yeah, I think you will start seeing guidelines come down from the Climate Reality Project itself, because there is now a Farm Bill initiative, and there is a conference planned for September. So I think you will get a lot more information in this field.
okay, well, thank you so much. This has really been helpful too. So thank you for your information. And if I can get my documents open real quick, I have to go into my Word program and see if I can find them, but I could maybe give you the link to the World Economic Forum. I think if you just Google something about regenerative agriculture and soil, then it might come up.
No,
But,
I do have that. You know,
oh, you do? Okay.
Lisa.
that really explains it, the whole fundamental process kind of well. But beyond that, you have to really talk to people about what they need, like hearing from farmers like Linda and everything, to know what they are, what is lacking in the current system, as well as you.
Yeah. And I think Chicago chapter has one pager and tools for to talk about this to everyone, you know. So it's just a small information compact. But as Klaus says, I think Climate Reality is working on it, and we have, I think, conference from June 12 or something. It starts from June 12. So just look out for your email, and they will and join the group for this thing. So it will be you will learn a lot from there.
Do we have any other questions out there? This has been a really fruitful discussion. Klaus, we thank you for your time. We could probably go on for the rest of the afternoon, but I think we're up against our time.
Yeah.
Already half an hour up. And this presentation will be on the Reality Hub, correct, Klaus?
Yeah, I'm going to cut the video and send it over, including the PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint has all the links to supporting articles.
Correct. And I will send also to my group here, whoever email addresses I have. But the rest of you can just always get access from Reality Hub.
Thank you, Klaus. It's a very informative discussion, very informative PowerPoint. Appreciate it very much.
We have basically two levers that we can pull to mitigate climate change, you know, to adapt. And one is the energy sector. And I think the energy sector has been really explored. People really understand, you know, what is needed, and then lots of debates and so on. But the other one is photosynthesis. And photosynthesis, 80% of water being used is for agriculture. So 80% of our focus in regard to photosynthesis should be on agriculture. And to change agriculture is to change $1 trillion industry. You know, food has so much emotional and cultural content. It's really, it really involves everyone. And in the energy sector, we have talked for years about turn off the lights, you know, get insulation, drive an energy efficient car. So we have all this, these micro steps that you need, you know, to engage with your energy. But we haven't talked about this in the food sector, because in the food sector, it's like, how about one day you just cut out meat, you know, and how about you eat like one less burger a week? I mean, it doesn't take huge stuff. You know, it takes little steps to reduce the consumption of the most harmful products, and which, you know, primarily is meat and dairy are the most invasive to agriculture, you know, product. So maybe I can leave you with that. Many little steps, you know, by many people will make a huge impact.
So I think with that we should conclude, and we'll see you next month for another fruitful discussion.
Thank you. A pleasure meeting you all.
Thank you, guys.